Well, Mika, obviously we're marking a sad anniversary. The flag at half-mast, September 11th. Obviously, what a day that we'll always remember for as long as we live. That day, though, you were just starting a new job at CBS, and what happened?
You know, it's we did an event the other night, Tuesday's Children, for children who were born on or after 9/11 from the families of victims of 9/11, and it's still kind of impossible to find the words that recognize what we witnessed that day, that really say it right. There are going to be more remembrances today. The President and Mrs. Obama are going to be observing a moment of silence at the White House.
But you ran down there that morning and covered it. We're down there when the buildings were falling, and we're down there a couple weeks.
Yep, and it's unlike anything I've ever covered before. And the faces of the people who were waiting for word for weeks and weeks and never really got the answers they needed, never got anything back from their loved ones, was one of the hardest things ever to witness. And we look at now what we face today with the threat of ISIS and the President bringing us into yet another war. We have to look back at what was lost that day and some of the mistakes we made along the way.
Willie, where were you on September 11th?
I actually was working for CNN in Atlanta and had been working an overnight shift, so I was still asleep because I worked till about 3 in the morning, and my then girlfriend, now wife, Christina, ran into my bedroom screaming, shouting. She'd come home from work because her sister was in one of the buildings. Thank God. She was pregnant, ran down 70 flights of stairs and got out, but we didn't know that she'd been out for hours and hours later because there was no communication. Yeah,
we don't have to ask where the next guy was. We saw him. The whole country followed him for a very long time after this tragic event. Let's go to Lower Manhattan and talk to former Republican mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Rudy,
the Freedom Tower.
God, 13 years later, you know? I mean, Meek and I did an event a couple of days ago for Tuesday's Children, survivors, kids, and I looked up at that tower and I just said, my God, what a crazy 13 years it's been. What a terrible 13 years in many ways, but in other ways, New York's rebuilding, still rebuilding from what happened that day.
It is, Joe. I mean, one of the positive things you can take out of it is what's happened in Lower Manhattan. You know, right after September 11, the days after, as the mayor, I wondered how are we ever going to bring everybody back, bring all the businesses back here. Well, it's now 13 years later. There are twice as many people living here as before September 11. And if you talk to them, I mean, they realize the threat, they realize the danger, but they also realize that the risk is something that they can accept. It's worth it to accept it, to live here. And that resiliency is a defense to terrorism. It's a way to say to terrorists, you can hit us hard, but you're not going to really destroy our confidence.
Yeah, it's amazing. More people down there, more businesses down there. Culturally, downtown was always hip, but now culturally, since 9/11, there has been such a cultural shift to not only Brooklyn, New York, but downtown New York. Since 9/11, it's really, in many ways, become the center of this city after the attacks.
Yeah, and if you had asked me that question 13 years ago, when these buildings were all unoccupied, we had to evacuate this entire area for months, and these buildings were in terrible shape. They had to be redone. They had to be rebuilt. I had to work hard to get some of the businesses to come back. Although a couple like Merrill Lynch and American Express, to whom I'll always be grateful, immediately said, we're coming back. But the rebuilding here, which I started and Mayor Bloomberg carried out so well, I think is a great testament to what I asked New Yorkers to do. That night, I said to the people of New York, as a result of this attack, I want you to be stronger. I want you to build on it. And they exceeded my expectations.
Really, they really did. I mean, New York. I mean, I was not a New Yorker at the time, and I remember just coming up looking at New Yorkers. And I remember right after the event actually going to give a speech. Everybody hated New Yorkers before 9/11. They just did. They were Yankee, they were New Yorkers, whatever. They were obnoxious.
Well,
they were
maybe
this, they were
seen as
that.
caustic.
I'm saying in the South. And I remember the biggest line, the biggest applause line I gave in a speech right after this in Northwest Florida, the Redneck Riviera, was, I love New York. The whole place went wild. This event connected New York City to the rest of America, made it middle America, made it the front line in the fight against terror.
Yeah, part of the family.
In a way that had never been in 225, 26 years.
Yeah, I think in some ways it took that horrible event to break some of those stereotypes and see who New Yorkers really were. They were the cops and the firefighters, and they were you, Mayor Giuliani, leading, remarkably watching that day, the mayor of the most important city on the world walking through the dusty streets of New York with a dust mask on, followed by all your advisors and by your cops and the firefighters who were with you. I just wonder if you could briefly share your recollections of the first moments you heard about this and what you went through that day.
Well, the first moment I heard about it, I was at the Peninsula Hotel on 55th Street. I was having breakfast. Police walked in and they said that a twin-engine plane had hit the North Tower. So I rushed down here not knowing how bad it was. About a mile away, there was a big explosion. We were notified by the police that the second plane had hit. And from that point on, of course, we knew we were dealing with an attack on America, a terrorist attack. And to describe the rest of those experiences would take a lifetime. I think about them every day. I think about the man who jumped from the 100th floor and I watched him come down. Then I think about the construction workers who volunteered, just came and just lifted things and helped us save people. And so you have wonderful memories and you have terrible memories, and you just have to live with them.
Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Coming
Thank
up.
you.